You know, it's not nearly seasonally appropriate in here. Oh, wait. Much better. It's spooky month, guys! Hello, geeks, freaks, and all those unique. I love this time of year as much as any goth girl with multiple fake skulls in her everyday decor and a slew of costumes can. Halloween is such a fun time for me, where I can watch horror movies, carve pumpkins, and just go completely ham decorating my house. One of my favorite things to get me in the mood for Halloween is watching seasonal television shows. There are a ton of shows that really have the feel of Halloween. But an interesting thing I've noticed is that often the episodes that put me in the most Halloween spirit actually aren't Halloween episodes. Oddly enough, more oftentimes than not, they actually seem to air in the wintertime. Now, a big reason for this might be that having a specific Halloween episode is really hard for syndication. By not actually theming the episode to the holiday, it can be easier for a large number of people to watch at any time of year. After all, who wants to watch a Halloween episode in June? Besides me. To make this list, I chose episodes of television that did not air in October. Any time within the month is fair game for a Halloween episode, so they needed to air outside of it to not be classified as a Halloween episode in my mind. But even if these episodes were not intended for Halloween, they still make the perfect watch to get you into the spooky mood. Number 10, RuPaul's Drag Race, Season 11, Episode 5, Monster Ball. A drag competition show may seem odd to be on the list, but really, it's sort of perfect. Drag culture and Halloween have long been associated with each other, with many drag queens taking their first tentative steps into the drag world under the protective guise of a Halloween costume. The ball is one of the most celebrated challenges on Drag Race, with the queens having to show off 3 completed looks based around 3 different themes, all of which are part of the overall ball theme. Season 11 featured the Monster Ball, with categories being Trampy Trick-or-Treater, Witch Please, and Monster I'd Like to Freak. I put this episode last on my list because, holy shit, how is this not a Halloween episode? Everything about it screams Halloween. The categories, especially the first one, are very geared towards the holiday. Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, is one of the guest judges. The only thing about this episode that is not Halloween is the time of year it originally aired. This is probably because Drag Race seasons don't typically know when they're going to air when they're being filmed, so they just do whatever they think is going to be a cool challenge. A similar thing happened in the most recent All-Stars season when they had a Christmas-themed challenge in July. The ball challenge always has some fantastic costumes, with the queens bringing 2 looks and making the third on the show. This season is no exception, with some of my personal favorites being Nina West's Audrey 2-inspired dress, Brooklyn Heights' Enchantress, as well as her on-point mummy, Plastique Tiara's Lady Death, and Sugar Cane's Bloody Mary. This is a great episode to watch to get you in the mood to up your game on costumes. Oh, what am I going to wear this year? I mean, to be honest, I have Starfleet uniforms I haven't worn yet. Number 9, Sherlock, The Hounds of Baskerville. With so many stories involving inventive murder and unsavory people, it's no surprise that the Sherlock Holmes canon should have some very scary stories. But there's one that beats all others, and that is The Hound of Baskervilles. Despite stripping away the gothic Victorian atmosphere, Mark Gatiss keeps the creep factor going when modernizing the story for Sherlock. Sherlock and John go to Dartmoor on a case, trying to find out the truth about a supposed demon hound that is terrorizing the community. Through the investigation, rather than a ghost story, a government conspiracy is uncovered, involving chemical warfare and cover-ups. Really, it's even creepier than if it had been a ghost story, because it's stuff that is actually pretty believable. A gigantic devil dog isn't going to be something you come across in real life, but a government program that causes paranoia, that's something that we actually see happening. What probably makes it scariest is Sherlock's breakdown in the middle of the episode. Benedict Cumberbatch is a fantastic actor, and he puts it all out there when he's not able to rely on his deductive reasoning for once. Through the first season and a half of the show, we were always able to rely on Sherlock. He was cool, but here he's falling apart, and it's really freaky to see. There are a lot of versions of The Hounds of the Baskervilles that would be a good watch, but if it's been a while since you've watched this particular episode of Sherlock, it's worth going back to this one for the Halloween season. Number 8, Star Wars The Clone Wars, Season 4, Episode 19, Massacre. Star Wars isn't the first thing that people think of when it comes to Halloween, but there can be just as much creep to be found in science fiction as there is horror, especially when you're getting into space witches. The Night Sisters were first introduced in the Star Wars, now non-canonical Legends novel, The Courtship of Princess Leia by the late Dave Wolverton. A slightly altered version of the concept would be used in the Clone Wars animated series. This would include recurring villain Asajj Ventress, who is the center of this episode. In this episode, Ventress returns to Dathomir to retake her vows as a Night Sister and forsake her ties to the Sith. But Count Dooku wants to destroy her and all of the other Night Sisters. This leads to an epic battle of the dark side. There is a definitive difference between witches and wizards, even in space. The Night Sisters feel a lot more ritualistic than the other Force wielders. They use spells and have things that we associate with witchcraft, like cauldrons and poppets. But what truly takes this episode to Halloween heights is the straight-up zombie war. In order to fight the battle droid army, an army of dead Night Sisters are raised, and it's droid-on-zombie violence. The whole atmosphere is just creepy. The good guys are nowhere to be seen. Everything is cast in a green or red glow. It's the perfect way to get some Star Wars into your Halloween. Number 7, Star Trek The Next Generation Conspiracy. I could have put Sub Rosa on this list, but I think that's scary for an entirely other reason. When it comes to horror, most people think of either paranormal horror or slasher horror. But there are so many other genres that I think need their due, which might require another video at some point. This episode represents one of those other genres, science fiction horror, to an even greater extent than Star Wars, which still has a lot of fantasy elements. In this episode, the Enterprise D must return to Earth to stop an alien species from infiltrating Starfleet in the most horrific way. Season 1 of The Next Generation was a rough one, and this episode is easily the best of it. It has an interesting storyline, which could have been followed up on, but they chose instead to go with the techno-zombies of the Borg, rather than what Lower Decks calls butt bugs crawling into admirals. I don't know if there's a creepier scene in Star Trek than the ending with the exploding admiral. And this episode provides a good balance in creep. The sci-fi creepy. So much of Halloween is taken up by the paranormal. I think you need to have a variety. There are so many more creepy episodes of Star Trek, so this might come up again some other time this month. Number 6, Batman the Animated Series, Season 1, Episode 31, Dreams in Darkness. So much of Batman can fall into the dark and gothic. It's not surprising that it should have a good Halloweenish episode, especially when you get into stuff with the Scarecrow. Now, this episode barely qualifies for this list. It may have been intended as a Halloween episode, but it aired in November, so it's fair game as far as I'm concerned. While dealing with a plot from the Scarecrow, Batman is dosed with fear toxin and is slowly being driven mad by horrific visions. There is something so unsettling about superheroes being unnerved, especially someone like Batman, who made his entire identity the scaring of the criminal element. It's turning his whole shtick against him. Batman the Animated Series played into this wonderful goth aesthetic, which is really amped up in this episode. It makes for perfect Halloween viewing. Number 5, Doctor Who, Season 3, Episode 10, Blink. It has been long said that Doctor Who is best watched from behind the sofa. There are dozens of scary episodes I could name, but I won't because frankly it would make a good list of its own. But there is one episode that stands above all others when it comes to how scary Doctor Who can be. That episode is Blink, where we're introduced to the iconic Weeping Angels. In this episode, Sally Sparrow is receiving cryptic messages from the Doctor about the Weeping Angels. With the brother of her friend, she'll try to help the Doctor while he's trapped in 1969 and stop the Angels from taking the TARDIS. In some ways, this episode is scarier for what's not in them than what is. This is one of the so-called Dr. Light episodes. Another term for this sort of episode were double-banked episodes, where to fit an extra episode into the production schedule, one was done where the Doctor was featured sparingly. Because of this, we focus on a character we haven't met before. In a normal Doctor Who episode, we're relatively confident that nothing's going to happen to the Doctor or companion, unless it's a series finale. But with Sally, anything could have happened. There is also the paranoia that the angels could just be out of your line of sight. Statues are ubiquitous, amping up the idea that the Weeping Angels could always be around, something that's really played up in the ending. This is one of the best episodes of Modern Who, and for good reason. It's most definitely creating a fantastic atmosphere for Halloween, and Weeping Angels make fantastic decor for your yard. Number 4, Supernatural, Season 3, Episode 9, Malus Maleficarum. Shockingly, considering the subject matter, Supernatural did very few actual Halloween episodes. But because of the subject matter, you can pretty much watch any episode and it will put you in a good Halloween-y place. However, this one stands out to me as one of the perfect things to usher in the season, even if it was unintentional. While still dealing with Dean's deal to a demon and his upcoming condemnation to hell, the Winchesters investigate a murder revealed to be the machinations of a witches' coven. Supernatural deals with witches a lot, but this was the first time they truly got into the subject, and I think it's probably the best appearance of it. There is a special atmosphere as they're dealing with the witches. This might be because the trio of women who become the witches evoke the idea of the Charmed Ones, a show that had just recently ended its long run at the time, and drew a lot of comparisons to Supernatural. In Germany, the witches were even dubbed by the same people who dubbed the Hallowell sisters. Season 3 is one of the best seasons of Supernatural, and it has a darkness to it, with the ticking clock to Dean's death looming closer with every episode. That helps gives this episode a feeling of unrest perfect for the season. Number 3, The Monkeys, Season 2, Episode 18, Monstrous Monkey Mash. Oh, not everything can be gloom and doom. Okay, so I'm actually a huge fan of the Monkeys. But this might not be a secret if anyone's ever Googled my last name. It's straight up an alien from the series finale of this show. But because I'm such a huge Monkeys fan, it has long been a Halloween tradition for me to watch this episode. In this episode, Davy is on a date with the beautiful Lorelei, played by the incomparable Arlene Martell. That's right, after she was done with Spock, T'Pring went on to seduce the monkeys. But Lorelei enchants Davy so she and her uncle can transform him into Dracula Reborn. The other monkeys have to rescue him and avoid being turned into monsters themselves. There is just as much a place for comedy in Halloween fare as horror. Just look at how many comedies are considered cult classics of the season. Malibu Barbie. Camp has just as much a place in Halloween as scary, and this episode is very high on camp. In the second season of The Monkeys, the humor was getting so irreverent, and this episode is no exception. Number 2, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Season 4, Episode 10, Hush. Like with Supernatural, finding a scary episode of Buffy is like shooting fish in a barrel, but in some ways that makes it even harder. How do you find the right fish? Yes, there are a lot of scary episodes, but what stands above and beyond all of the others? Buffy does have its share of Halloween episodes. However, it's never a huge event because, and I kid you not, demons in the Buffyverse that gets too commercialized and too crass to do anything on the actual day. But the episode I'm talking about doesn't take place at Halloween, and it's not only one of the scariest Buffy episodes, but one of the scariest episodes of network television. This episode was an achievement in writing, acting, directing, cinematography, and score. What starts out as an episode about a lack of communication between the various couples takes a turn when the entire town wakes up without their voices. They've been stolen by the creepy gentlemen, monsters who are stealing hearts from the mute citizens of the town. This episode is one of the most cited episodes of Buffy, and that's for good reason. It's an incredible atmospheric piece that delivers horror in such an elevated way. By taking away language, something that was a hallmark of Buffy, there is a level of comfort missing, creating something unsettling. Particular highlight for this episode are the silent villains, the gentlemen, the main one being played by Doug Jones. The other standout is the score by Christoph Beck. While Beck's work on Buffy was always impeccable, the lack of dialogue meant he was able to come to the forefront, and he delivered in spades. When it comes to non-Halloween Halloween episodes, I don't think there is a single better horror example than this one. Number 1, Boy Meets World, Season 5, Episode 17, and then there was Sean. Which is why the number 1 spot is taken by another comedy. Hush is great, but it's not a surprise that Buffy should be able to get people into the Halloween spirit. Not only is this episode not an actual Halloween episode, but it comes from a coming-of-age comedy from ABC's classic TGIF lineup, which may be the last place you would look for a Halloween-themed episode. In the late 90s, the slasher genre was experiencing its resurgence when Scream came out in 1996. Suddenly, movies that had been relegated to midnight screenings and direct-to-VHS were part of the mainstream. Boy Meets World capitalized on these teen slashers with their parody, which perfectly skewered these movies while exploring the emotional arcs of their main characters. Our main characters are struggling with their group dynamic in the wake of Corey and Topanga's breakup. A disagreement in class causes them to get detention. While they're at school after class to serve their punishment, they start getting killed off one by one by a masked killer. Maybe it's because of my age and the fact that Scream was one of the first horror movies I saw in theaters, but Boy Meets World's parody of it, and others of its ilk, are so pitch perfect that it makes a fantastic watch when it's Halloween and you're watching those movies. Of all of the episodes on this list, I think this was the one I was most shocked to find out wasn't actually a Halloween episode, as it's so outside of the norm for the series. It seems like it would be natural for a holiday episode. They really captured something special, and this episode frequently appears on the Best of Boy Meets World lists, and I think it makes the perfect way to end out a list of not Halloween episodes. So comment down below with your thoughts about great Halloween episodes that weren't made for Halloween. If you like my videos, please subscribe to my channel. I do videos about Star Trek, Star Wars, and lots of other geeky things. Now that it's spooky month, I'm going to be starting my Halloween celebrations. Until I post something else up, be sure to check out my older videos, such as my underrated entertainment for Halloween, as well as my deep dive into my favorite Halloween movie of all times, Phantom of the Paradise. If you want to support me, please visit my Patreon. You can also buy me a coffee, or you can go to my Redbubble and TeePublic to buy my geeky graphic designs. You can find me on all platforms as Emcee Frodis. On Patreon, subscribers can get exclusive early access to my Star Trek 2009 rewrite. So until next time, live long, may the Force be with you, and stay spooky.